Hi guys, I'm doing a very quick video here for Joris Clearan from the Top Table Gaming group, who asked about how I painted Uruk Hai skin. So I gave a brief overview of what I do, but he asked for a video, so I'm going to do a very quick one here. So to begin with, this is what I'm going to be painting. So it's an Uruk Hai siege troop. So there is a bit of skin on here, just around the arms, the legs, the fingers, and the neck. Colours I'm going to be using, very simple. Doombull brown, Tuscarora fur, Lamian medium, and I'm also going to be using Nuln Oil wash. As you can see, the model's already primed black. It just gives it a nice dark colour because that's what the Uruk Hai are. I'm not going to be focusing on the armour in this video, so it might be a little bit of sloppiness in this, but we'll see how we get on. First up, we're going to go for Doombull brown as the base layer. As you can see here, I'm using a homemade wet palette. For me, I wouldn't go to not using one now. I've just got really used to using them. It just helps really kind of thin down your paints to the consistency that you want. Some people pay a fortune for wet palettes. I've just made one out of a Chinese takeaway container. It just thins down the paint to the consistency that you want, and then you just start applying it to the areas that you want the paint on. So I'm just going to start off on these legs. I'm trying to make it so that you guys on camera can see. You might need to do a couple of thin coats of this, just because as you thin the paint down it becomes slightly more opaque. You'll have a little bit more control over the paint if you do it in a couple of thin layers. I wouldn't worry too much. As I say, I'm just doing this as a tutorial, so I wouldn't worry too much, because if you go over the edges, because you will afterwards be doing the armour anyway. There's a horrible mould line there which I haven't prepared, but there we go. So yeah, don't worry too much if you just go over the edges ever so slightly at this stage. You can always tidy it up afterwards. There is the first leg painted. So I'll finish the rest and I'll come back when I'm done. So as you can see, I've painted all the flesh areas in Doombull brown. I find that Doombull does cover pretty well, even though it is a layer paint, so I find that you don't need to put a base layer on or anything. That's just my personal experience. This isn't going to win you any golden demons, but it is just a way of getting them painted pretty quick. So I'll move on to the next step. So the next step, I'm going to be using Nuln Oil. Normally I would paint up the armour at the same time, and then I'd be coating the entire model with Nuln Oil. But what I'm going to do is just show you guys this on the flesh. So I'm using this straight out of the pot, undiluted, and I'm just going to apply it quite heavily to all the fleshy areas. As I say, don't worry too much if it goes elsewhere on the model, because you will be kind of doing touch-ups and things at a later stage. Personally, I always start with the lowest layer. I know everybody will paint slightly differently. So for me, you know, any skin areas I'll always try and paint first, and then kind of move up from there. So potentially the cloth bits, followed by then the armour on top. But everybody's different, so that's completely up to you. As you can see, I'm kind of dabbing this on fairly heavily. I don't really mind too much if this pulls a little bit, but you can always drag some away using your brush if you need to, if you find it pulls a little bit too much. Hopefully you can see there, that is pretty much covered. In this tutorial I'm just going to be doing one coat of Nuln Oil. You can do two just to darken it down even further, but we'll just do one at this stage. So So now the coat of null oil has dried, you can see it's just kind of pulled in some of the recesses and made them a little bit darker. So what I'm going to do now is just reset that base tone that we had with the Tuscarora. So what's great about a wet palette is actually the paint that I had earlier is still slightly wet, so I'm going to reuse that. I'm also going to be using a slightly smaller brush than last time, because it'll just give me a little bit more control over where the paint goes. Make sure you do thin your paints a little bit here, because you want it to be almost a little bit opaque and a little bit translucent. And where I'm going for is the raised parts that are away from the darkened parts from the null oil. So great example is just the top of the thigh here. Let's be lightening that back up towards the sort of base tone. Anywhere where the null oil has pulled, you just want to avoid if you can. As I say, you're almost going back to that original base tone. I have to apologise, I'm painting at a slightly funny angle so you guys can see on the camera. Once I've finished this, we'll come back and I'll show you where I'm up to. So I've reset the base tones. You can still see that there are slightly sort of dark recesses just on the legs and in the creases in the arms and things there. So the next step, I'm going to add some Tuscarora fur to the mix. Because we're only using a very, very small amount of this, I'm just going to use a little bit of Doombull from the previous lot. But what I'm also going to do is add a very, very small amount of Lamian Medium, which thins down the mix ever so slightly. Makes it that little bit more kind of opaque and translucent, and it just makes it a little bit thicker than if you just mix it with water. So this is a slightly kind of lightened up version of Doombull. And then what I'm going to be doing with this is just targeting the really kind of high areas, the bits that would catch the light if the light was shining down from above. One of the best ways that I've been told to do this is by sprinkling water on the miniature. If you're in doubt, shining a light on it and just seeing where it glistens, and that'll give you a really good insight as to where you should be highlighting. So I'm just going to start on the arm here. Just going to thin the paint down ever so slightly. And I'm just going to highlight just one of the creases on the arm just there. If in doubt, you just want to be following the ridges of the muscles. Water to the mix. A little bit thin. So one of the prime areas is just the top of the legs here. They would definitely be catching some light. You only need a very thin line of it just to highlight it ever so slightly. Once this dries, it will dry that little bit kind of more translucent as well. so it will leave some of that base colour to come through. Going back over the bits that I feel might need a little bit more highlighting. If you're doing the face, it's probably worth just following the jawline round. Again, I'm painting at this funny angle, so it's quite difficult for me to see. There you go, that's kind of brightened it up ever so slightly. And it just gives you that kind of extra bit of depth perception. As I say, that's not going to win you any golden demons, but if you're trying to paint a tabletop full of Uruk Hai, it will definitely do the job. So I hope that's helped. If you've got any questions, then feel free to ask. Catch you later.